Samantha, we are back. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
What's up? Get on this scan screen.
I'm waiting for her to jump on my account.
Okay, moving on to the agenda. Thank you, that was a good tour.
Yes, thank you.
I've been in this business for 45 years and learned some things today.
You can share it with me too, because I don't.
I guess on with the agenda, we're supposed to have a presentation. Is
Yes,
that correct?
yes, we have 2 presentations left. One
Racing.
by the jail and then one by the district attorney.
Mr. District Attorney, would you care to proceed?
What? Passcode, so I can share the screen, and I think I'm getting it. Let's see. So let me share my screen because I'm just an attendee.
Okay.
Non-attendee.
Where are the sandwiches from?
That was which account?
Fast subs.
Yes.
College and.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
So you should for the last.
Go first. Can I do?
Sure.
You know how to do this. I'm on panelist.
Must be good because
Yep.
people ask where are they from.
You will share it since we. Like me to share it.
Okay, are we ready?
We're ready.
All right. Can people back on there hear us? Do we know?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Well, again, I'm Jordan Fluff. I'm district attorney. I'm going to share some data that we have gathered sort of in the last year. This is part of a project we did called Prosecutor Performance Indicators. You'll probably hear me refer to it as PPI. Essentially, this was a research project. We partnered with folks at the University of Denver as well as Loyola University, and they have done some nationwide work on collecting data in district attorneys' offices. And we were part of the largest data transparency project in the country this past year, along with 7 other judicial districts in Colorado. And so we have all what I'm about to show you published on our website. So this is all public data. And there's a lot of it, so I'm going to try to run through it pretty quickly and highlight just some of what that is. But then I would point everyone back to our website. If you go to just the Larimer DA website, click on our statistics and tracking button, you can get to all of this information. Is it possible to make the share screen bigger so that folks in the room can maybe see this a little better?
I just want to say thank you, and I'll see you guys every month. Thank you so much. Have a nice night. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are you doing this off the screen?
Yeah, so this is your Zoom? Yeah, it actually, I think on most folks it's bigger. I think just on this one it may not be.
Is there a way to pull that across on the screen? So you can
Not on mine.
are you the host?
I'm the host, but this is it, but I think Stacy is watching it from her Zoom thing and it's quite large.
Well, hopefully, again, we're going to fly through this, but so this is just to sort of orient folks. This is our case filings per year. This is aggregated quarterly. That top line is misdemeanors, that yellow line is felonies. Essentially what this shows is we're filing around 11,000 cases a year, and that there has been a dip since COVID. So COVID cases went down, and they have not really rebounded. Most of that is in the misdemeanor area. So it's a lot of traffic cases, especially are down. Law enforcement priorities have been sort of reoriented in terms of how folks are policing and what they're doing, and that's reflected in some of our case data. So some of the case filings are down a little bit. I will orient folks quickly, and I'll click on 2022 here just to show the types of cases we were doing. Again, that's traffic all the way on the right. And if I toggle back to 2017, you can see that bar proportionally is pretty big. In 2022, that's gone down a lot. On the far left, that's persons crimes. That's crimes against people. So that's going to be assaults is the biggest thing in that category. There's also going to be sexual assaults, harassments, murder, that sort of thing. And so those are some of our bigger, perfect.
I'm learning as I go along, sorry.
I'm not sure, is that you?
So I show you that orientation to that as we get into some of the data, just to understand sort of some of what we were dealing with. I'll now go to felony referrals. So one of the important parts of this project is we have broke a lot of this data down by race and ethnicity. So the three categories of race and ethnicity that you'll see on this are white, black, and Hispanic. That's essentially all that our system is allowing us to track. Obviously, we know there are other ways that people identify themselves, but those are the major categories that we're able to track at this time. This is what we call felony declination rate, and I'll go back to this in a minute in our disparity analysis. But declination rate is important because that's the first time we see a case, is our opportunity to decide whether we're going to charge a case and what we're going to charge. So that's the first entry point into the district attorney's office from the upstream actors and societal implications. In 2022, it has 2023 data. I haven't scrolled down to that only because it's aggregated quarterly, so that's just first quarter data, so that's pretty incomplete. It's not really very representative at this point in the year. 2022 is a complete data set. That shows the declination rate is pretty similar. This is amongst white and black defendants. Then the next bar is showing white and Hispanic defendants. Again, that does show a small disproportionality there in 2022. But rather similar across the years. And again, we're going to get back into that a little bit more in a minute in our disparity analysis. And if folks have questions, please feel free to stop me. In case resolution, this is how we are resolving a case, for instance, through a plea agreement. This shows plea differences by race and ethnicity. And what it's specifically showing is pleading to a lesser charge. So if someone is, for instance, charged with a felony and they're offered a misdemeanor, that's a plea to a lesser charge. That's something that we want theoretically to be about equal. It shows in 2022, the percentage of white defendants pleading to a lesser charge was more than black defendants by a few percent there in 2022. So that is something we're keeping an eye on. Between white and Hispanic defendants for 2022, it shows it was identical. So we were offering lower pleas identically between white and Hispanic defendants. Moving on, we can go to sentencing. And sentencing is going to show us incarceration rates. Incarceration rates in 2022, we do see that a higher percentage of black defendants were incarcerated than white defendants. This is, again, something we're going to get back to in our disparity analysis because there's a couple of factors at play here. One is what is coming into our system. How many cases with black defendants, Hispanic defendants, and white defendants are being referred to us. Another is that with black defendants especially, the data set is very small. So we're not seeing a large number of black defendants in the Larimer County justice system because our population just does not have a high amount of black people living in Larimer County. The data for Hispanic defendants is a little bit more accurate because, of course, they make up a bigger percentage of our population. This shows that there was a higher incarceration rate, again, for Hispanic defendants in 2022. Again, that's something we're going to come back to in the disparity analysis because of the inputs into our system. So I will skip to that. That is another button up here. It's see on the top left. I'm going to click on it, disparity analysis. So this is all, there we go. This is all public data. There's two things to sort of know about that. One is that this was all new data to us as well. So we made this public in September. We also just got it in September of last year. This wasn't data that DAs had and we're just keeping secret. This is an all new collection project And so this was new to all the DA's offices that we were looking at in September. And it's really just a starting point. So, collecting this data, of course, does not solve any problems in disproportionality or disparities, but it gives us the input to start to identify where there may be problems and what we have under our scope of control in the DA's office in terms of mitigating some of those problems. The second part is that it is public, so the public can see all of this data. The public can see how it's changing or not changing. We're also publishing data stories on this page to try to highlight, where we are making inroads and making differences in some of this data.
Is this data available statewide? I mean, is it statewide per district?
Well, it's quasi-statewide, so we are partners with 7 other judicial districts. So there are 7 other districts in that it's a lot of the big metro districts. Denver's involved, Jeffco's involved, Arapahoe's involved. So you can get a pretty good picture. We were part of the pilot phase. We volunteered for that. Now they're in phase 2. So there's a few more DA's offices coming on. It's still not statewide, but that's our goal. But of course, every DA can make their own decision about whether to participate or not. So this is in our disparity analysis. This is a very long report. If you look at the sort of, little toggle cursor line over here at the, this is about a 40-page report. So I'm obviously not going to go through all this tonight. But I'm going to show folks some of the beginning, because one of the important parts is what is coming into our system. So this disparity analysis essentially tried to look proportionally at what we would expect once folks are in the DA's office. So if a black defendant comes to the DA's office, Hispanic defendant comes to the DA's office, and a white defendant comes to the DA's office, and they all have the same charge, the same criminal history, what are the odds that they are going to be treated similarly? Because we want to treat folks coming into our office the same and prevent disparities from occurring within the walls of the DA's office. So the first thing this shows is Hispanic population is about 7% in Larimer County, and it's about 20% of the referrals to our office. So there's about almost 3 times the rate of our population is being brought to us. There's a couple ways that we can look at addressing that. The first nexus in our office is that filing decision. So are we filing the right cases? Are we filing strong cases? And are we filing cases in the interest of justice? And so we're trying to make better filing decisions, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more in our action steps. With black defendants, it shows similar data. So that's about 1% of our Larimer County population, and about 4.7% of the cases that are coming to us involve black defendants. So the upstream is very much weighted already disproportionately when it's coming to our doors. So knowing that, what is going on at the DA's office? This is a graph that this research project has used, a visual. Make this a little bit bigger here. Let's do that.
I think it's also on the second page of the handout that says key takeaways.
It is a handout. Showing essentially what the criminal justice system has under their scope of control and what we don't. So we know that there are disproportionalities coming to our door. That is a fact. So what can we do at the DA's office to deal with those disproportionalities, to mitigate those, try to work on treating everyone equally once they come to our office? The analysis focused on 4 areas. One was declination of felony referrals. Again, that means law enforcement's bringing us a charge and we're declining to file that charge. The second was dispositions. That means how we resolve a case. Is that a plea to probation, jail sentence, prison sentence, etc. The third is charge reduction, or people seeing a reduced level of charges. And the fourth is imposition of incarceration. So who is actually receiving a carceral sentence like jail or prison versus who is getting probation or diversion or deferred judgment or other types of sentences.
Second question, please. Why do you normally decline a felony referral?
It's a great question. So there can be a whole host of reasons. But if we don't think we can prove a case, then we shouldn't be filing that case. But we also may not file a case in the interest of justice. A case might come to us, we might technically be able to prove that, but there are other factors. For instance, maybe that person was also the victim of a crime that we would not file a case for.
I just ask a follow-up question?
Please.
I know nationally, not necessarily here, that plea bargaining is often seen as a manipulation to scare people and get them to plea. And
Yeah, so I understand that perception. I would very strongly push back against that for this reason. Statewide in Colorado, something like 98% of cases are resolved through stipulated agreements, plea agreements, and only about 1.5 or 2% of cases go to trial, and that's about the same in Larimer County. There's a whole host of reasons for that. You know, resources wise, for instance, imagine if 98% more cases were going to trial, the system would simply break down. It would be impossible. But there is a just reason for it as well, and that's the more important reason. And that is that we are offering folks opportunities. Some of these programs I'm about to talk about, our diversion program, which means someone completes some terms and we dismiss the case outright. Our deferral program, which means someone does plead, they complete everything, that case can be dismissed after the fact. In all those cases, folks can get that record sealed, which means they're not going through life with convictions that may prevent them from getting employment, from getting student loans, from getting housing. And again, they're completing, the terms they're completing are non-carceral terms. Those are things like paying restitution to victims, doing community service, taking classes. So we're providing folks with huge opportunities through those plea agreement processes. Whereas if all I could say was, well, plead guilty to the charge or go to trial, then folks are not getting the benefit of that bargain. So yes, there's absolutely a benefit to the DA's office that we are able to save resources, but there's a huge benefit to the defendant and to justice by being able to offer plea agreements in cases. And the defendant, of course, always has the right to say no. Say, either A, I think I'm not guilty, or B, I just don't like your offer, and so I'm going to take my chances at trial. So ultimately, they hold the cards of whether to say yes or no to that. The far majority of people in our system are represented by attorneys. We have a very strong public defender system in Colorado that's state funded. On very low level stuff, traffic stuff and so forth, we see people dealing with it themselves. I go in our entry level courtroom, which we call 1A, which is where a lot of the minor stuff comes in all the time. We say, make sure folks know they have a chance to get an attorney. The majority of folks at very low level stuff say, I don't want an attorney. I want to hear what you have to offer, and I want to get the hell out of here. So it's not a manipulative practice when used appropriately. Are there instances nationally, historically, that plea agreements have been used in a manipulative way? Of course. So some of those examples are absolutely real and are very serious, but the process as a whole, if used appropriately and if you have your deputies trained appropriately, is not a detriment to defendants in any way. Yeah. Now I lost my train of thought where I was at, but that was a great question. That was a great
May I
question.
ask another?
Please.
And I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I'm not sure anyone else does. Where do you get your referrals from?
Good question, yeah. So every law enforcement agency in Larimer County brings their cases to us. There's, of course, very small municipal courts in some districts that'll handle some minor stuff like speeding or parking tickets or camping violations. And some stuff, if it's, crosses state lines, maybe the U.S. Attorney's Office would take something like that. But the, 99% of the crime occurring in Larimer County comes to our office. So that's from everyone from Colorado State Patrol, to Larimer County Sheriffs, to Fort Collins Police, to Johnstown and Timnath Police, and smaller agencies like that. With misdemeanor cases, those get filed automatically. We don't review those, but then we do have the opportunity to say, on the back end, we can still dismiss it, we can amend the charges. For felonies, those do come to us first, and we get to make that decision. Is this going to be filed? Is this not going to be filed? Which goes back to sort of some of those initial questions of, how those decisions are being made. So again, the strength of the case is important. The one important thing to add to that is law enforcement's burden to make an arrest is what we call probable cause, which essentially means, more likely than not. There's evidence to legitimately think that this person committed this crime. Our burden as prosecutors is to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt at trial unanimously to a jury. So it's a huge difference. And within that difference, there are cases that must be dismissed. That doesn't mean law enforcement did anything wrong. They might have They might have done a great job, investigated to the fullest extent, done a professional investigation, an unbiased investigation, got the, quote unquote, right person for the right crime, but there's simply not enough evidence to ever prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury. And if it falls in that middle area, it's incumbent upon us to dismiss the case, because we don't want to drag a defendant, or a victim for that matter, through a long process when we know we can't prove that case. That would be unethical for us to do.
Do you have many cases, or any cases, where there are constitutional violations by law enforcement that you have to kick out?
Sure. So, like Fourth Amendment issues is usually what that is. Sometimes Fifth Amendment issues, if someone's been questioned improperly, if someone's been searched improperly. Sometimes that's something we can catch at screening, filing of a case. Often those are a little bit more complex, and we'll see defendants file motions, but we're constantly litigating Fourth and Fifth Amendment motions issues. That doesn't mean law enforcement did anything wrong because we're litigating them. Usually we see that things are done 100% correctly, but defendants have the right to litigate those, as they should. But that is one thing that, yes, could theoretically be caught at a filing decision. One of the things you'll see in a minute, one of our action steps, is to hopefully try to get more information at that filing decision, because the more information we have, the better decision we'll be able to make. If we just have one report, we might say, oh, it seems like a strong case. Well, if we get the next 5 reports, we say, there's a lot of questions here. Again, doesn't mean law enforcement did anything wrong, but that means at trial, we're looking at a trial through a defense attorney's mind. What defenses are they going to raise? What is their defense going to be? What questions can they ask? And a lot of times, even if it seems clear based on the straightforward case, well, sure, this person committed this crime. Once the defense attorney starts poking holes, you say, well, that's probably reasonable doubt. Again, it doesn't mean it's the wrong person or anyone who's charged inappropriately, but reasonable doubt probably exists. And again, that means that's the case we should be filing.
When you put this data together for the referrals, did it get broken down by what agency referred in terms of the demographics?
Not for race and ethnicity. So we have an internal dashboard where we can break down things a little bit more, but it starts getting pretty unreliable because, again, we only have so many, for instance, Black defendants in our system to begin with, and even you'll see some of that data is a very small sample size. Then if we tried to look at, for instance, Black defendants brought to us from the Johnstown Police Department, that might be one person a year. And so looking at whether that was filed or not, or what sentence that person received, is just not really a reliable way to look at any data. So the race and ethnicity data we've just been looking at as an aggregate countywide.
The reason I ask is I think the city of Fort Collins did an analysis like that for their department. And so I just didn't know if that was what informed this study and the other agencies did it or not, but it doesn't sound like it.
No, so sort of 2 parts to that. We are reliant on a lot of the data law enforcement gives us. So it's not just the cases, but some of the data, like our race and ethnicity data comes from law enforcement collection. And so it is not perfect. Our race and ethnicity data, and law enforcement agencies would tell you that it's not perfect. Some of the struggles that I know they face out on the street are, they don't want to ask someone, hey, are you Black, white, or Hispanic, get an answer, and then say, okay, you're under arrest for DUI. That would not look very good, and that's not a position law enforcement wants to be in. So that collection is very difficult for them. They're required by state to collect quite a bit of data now, and are doing that, but it's not perfect, and I think everyone understands that. One of the things we're trying to do as well is collect better victim data. We want to know, are we charging crimes against where there's Black victims, white victims, Hispanic victims at the same rates? Are we giving sentences, taking those cases seriously, for instance, if there are a Hispanic victim versus a white victim? So that's one of our next steps. Our victim data is very incomplete at this point, and that's mainly true statewide, and that's one of the things that this project brought to light, is that would be an important thing to start trying to collect. Okay. So I'll go to our key takeaways. This is on the sheet. The first is that if you look at this proportionality analysis, it shows that across the board, there are very, very few and very, very small disparities within the DA's office. Again, there are certainly some disproportionalities, meaning those inputs that I just showed you, there are a lot more Hispanic and Black defendants being brought to us with cases. Again, there's a wide variety of societal factors that can play into that. But once they come to our office, those disparities are very, very low. The second takeaway there, though, is there are some. And so now we're starting to look at what some of those are, try to figure out what actions we can take to mitigate those in the office. That first one there, which is the second bullet point, is about deferral rates. Again, that deferred judgment means we're giving someone's pleading guilty up front, they're doing something usually like probation, probably for a short period of time, 6-12 months. They're doing some things like community service, drug and alcohol treatment, maybe domestic violence treatment. If they complete that successfully, that case is getting dismissed. Programs like our diversion and deferral programs, we see as big potential to be equity drivers within our office, because they are giving folks these huge opportunities. And that goes back to my discussion about the benefits of pleas, to get these cases dismissed ultimately, to learn something, to try to mitigate whatever behavior brought them into the criminal justice system, and to come out a better person who is not going to reoffend, and therefore should be able to go on with their lives without the burdens of convictions, incarceration, and other things that the criminal justice system can bring. So getting that deferral rate in better balance is important. Again, that discrepancy was small, about 2.5 or 3%. So it's not a huge problem by any means, but we'd like it to be even smaller. That's our goal, is to reduce these as much as possible. So that's one of the things we're beginning to look at. That third bullet point there is dismissal rate, and it shows there is a different dismissal rate between white, Black, and Hispanic defendants. That one's a little bit trickier to say what we want that to look like. And the reason is because of that disproportionate number of cases being brought to us. So for instance, if 4 or 5 times the amount of Black defendants are brought to us, well, not filing more of those cases or dismissing more of those cases isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it might be doing a service in the name of equity if we are dismissing more of those cases. So that's a very tricky metric. Higher or lower is not necessarily bad. We need to be looking at the whole picture, which is why this is a 40-page report. And then finally, I'll go to some of our actionability steps. The first one is training in our office. And so we want to make sure that everyone in our office, from victim advocates to deputy DAs, to our investigators, to our staff, understand bias, understand these disproportionalities that we're talking about right now, understand our role in the system. And so we've done that. Mary's going to talk a little bit more when she talks about our office here in a second, what some of those trainings look like. But we did a couple different trainings last year that were all staff, all attorneys, and those are very valuable to sort of foster these discussions and make sure that some of these issues were on the forefront of our radars as we went about our work. The second actionability step there is again what I talked about, that deferral program. So we're trying to expand our use of deferred judgments. We're trying to provide more training on what those are, what people should be looking for. One thing that is being discussed in the DA community currently is how we use criminal histories. And whether that is a driver of inequity in DA's offices. Because if someone, for instance, in a district maybe that was not as forward-thinking as we are in Larimer County, if Black defendants or Hispanic defendants were receiving more convictions, for instance, and I'm not trying to pick on them, but Arapahoe, and then they come up here and we say, well, we're not going to offer them the opportunity of diversion or a deferred sentence because, look, they have a criminal history. Well, that criminal history may have already been driven by inequities elsewhere. And so we're looking at ways to sort of eliminate some of those factors.
How do you track that from different counties, different districts?
How do I track what?
How do you track that the conviction in another district may have been unfair?
There's no way to track it. One thing that people are doing is just removing criminal history from their analysis. So, for instance, I know that Jefferson County right now is looking at their diversion program for certain categories of crime, saying we're not going to look at criminal history. If you've committed X crime, a low-level thing, let's say a misdemeanor theft, we're going to offer you diversion, period. So we're looking at that, whether that will be increase the equity in some of those programs. Tracking reasons for dismissal. This is a big one for me. When we look at things like why is a case being dismissed, right now, in the aggregate, there's absolutely no way to know that. And again, we prosecute about 12,000 cases a year, so trying to figure things like that out is very difficult. So we use the same data system statewide with DA's offices, and so we're trying to build in some dismissal codes so that folks know why it's dismissed. Now, for instance, if a case, going back to like what we're looking at a felony filing, the case is dismissed because they got the wrong person, that's sort of a big deal. If the case is dismissed because, you know what, they had the right person, the right charges, but the evidence just doesn't really add up, or a witness died, or a witness left the state, that's a very different reason for dismissing a case. So trying to track some of those might point us to where some of the pressure points are, or some of the inequities may be. That's hopefully something we get built into the system this year, but we're working on that. Then the last one I mentioned a little bit is trying to get more information up front. Making that decision at the first point it comes into the DA's office is important to us, because even a felony charge, or a misdemeanor charge for that matter,
Find my iPhone alert. It's in my hand, so I'm not sure
You found it.
why
Good for you. The power of a charge is significant. And so again, we really do not want to be filing charges that we later dismiss. Now again, we don't necessarily know all the reasons because that's not tracked yet. Again, sometimes it's going to be dismissed for very legitimate reasons, like the witness has left the state and we can't get him back. Well, there's nothing anyone can do about that. But if it was filed because the evidence is too weak, well, that's hopefully something that we don't file ever to begin with. And the way to prevent that is to try to get more information up front, for instance, on constitutional issues, or strength of evidence, or et cetera. So, we're working to try to get more of that information up front as well. That is the quick and dirty of this, but I would encourage, again, you can see how far the cursor has gotten down on this page, and then we just drop into some of the actual analysis, and I'm just going to show you the first one as an example. So this is predicted probability of felony declination. Again, that means us saying, no, we're not going to file it when law enforcement brings a case. And again, this shows equalizing all those factors. Again, so equalizing for population, equalizing for criminal history. It is almost identical, the odds that we're going to decline a case with a white defendant or decline a case with a Hispanic defendant. There was not enough data in this particular one for black defendants. So that continues all the way down through the sheet with all sorts of categories.
I'm just curious if there's gender.
There is, it's not in this, Mary can correct me, it's not in this proportionality analysis, but if you go back to our dashboard, and you go to metrics and you go to defendant characteristics, it does show page. Scroll by it. Yep. So cases filed by gender. This is pretty typical in the criminal justice system everywhere. Male defendants make up the bulk of the criminal justice system. That's not unique at all in Larimer County. But we did not, the research project didn't do a specific disparity analysis based on that. And I will turn it over to Mary to talk about some of our internal efforts.
So I ask a question first, then. You're talking about training for the system. Does that also look at bias, known and unknown?
Training, yes.
Yeah, we had a couple of trainings in this last year. One was Kathleen Maltby, she's an attorney and does training for a lot of DAs. And her training was kind of two-part. He was looking at systematic bias and unconscious bias, both in reviewing cases. She's an attorney, so she kind of understood that. But then she also talked about it within the employment arena and getting judge referrals for people who are going up for judge, and that we have a tendency to like or think about people who look and act more like us in a different way than people who are different. So she talked about that not only as attorneys moving into a system and having like mentoring, but thinking critically about who are you associating with? Are you being inclusive? Are you being intentional about, being friendly with people who aren't like you? We also had, I mentioned in there, an anti-racist training from the WYMCA or WCA Boulder. That was a two-part training. In part, we watched the documentary 13th, and we talked more about systematic biases and the people that come into the criminal justice system and what are the other factors that we're not thinking about, maybe when we're just looking at charges and individual in front of us. So I had a couple handouts. Those who love numbers might notice the totals are different. That's because the one that says the workforce analysis, that's a really detailed breakdown of race and gender by position. That snapshot that is from April 27th. The one that is indicating years was taken today, and that also includes people who have not started working for us yet, which is why it's a higher number. So overall, and if this is, let me know what part of this you want to know more about. I'll just go over what I have, but please jump in with any questions. And looking at the demographics of our office overall, about 84 or 85% are white, 2% are Asian. We actually just had another female attorney join us who was Asian, so that would be 3% now. 8.6% of our staff are Hispanic. 2 chose not to identify. 1 identified as 2 or more races, and 1 identified as Black. Also of note, we do have an additional female victim advocate who's joining us who is Hispanic. She's also bilingual, which is something we're adding now to our postings, that we are encouraging people who are bilingual to apply. We're seeing a huge need for that, especially in diversion and also with our victims.
You're looking at the level that person has within the organization.
Yep. And so this breaks down by position, but I was also interested in that. And also I'm very grateful. I didn't know the county provides this information, so I was doing little check marks on Excel sheets. So now to know it's available like this, I could take snapshots quarterly and do a comparison as part of EEOP plan. So in looking at our leadership and looking at the top leaders in terms of administration and chiefs, we have 6 males and 4 females, and everyone is white. If you look at our attorneys overall, we have 19 men, 20 women, 4 do not identify as white, so about 10% of our attorneys are not white. In terms of our leaders overall, of all of our managers, we have 10 women, 9 men, and 1 of those is a Hispanic female. So not great when you go up to the leadership positions. That's something we need to work on and identify how we diversify those positions. Any other questions with regard to gender or ethnicity? In terms of our age, there was also a breakdown, and it's in 5-year increments. Overall, about 65% of our staff are under the age of 40, and about 35% are over the age of 40. The person that ran this for me started laughing. She's been with the office for about 10 years. She's like, 5 years ago, this would have looked very different. And I've been in HR administration for about 14 years, and they've talked about it since I started about baby boomers are coming out, like there's going to be this huge shift, and I think we are seeing that now, that a lot of people are retiring, they're leaving the workforce, and so we are getting a lot of young people. I will also say anecdotally, it seems like in government, you get people who come in, work 5 years, and then leave, in part because it's pay, you can't do private, and then there's a handful of people that want to stay for the pension and have their career there. In terms of our recruitment efforts to diversify, one of the things you think about is, on its face, advertising at Indeed.com and local universities, you're being fair. But then if you take a step back and think about it, if the universities are local and are majority white, are you really being critical about how you're recruiting folks? So some of the things we've done to try to diversify who we're recruiting is we've reached out specifically to the bar contacts. The bar actually has a diversity bar contact list, so we've been sending them our postings now. So that includes the Asian Pacific American Bar Association, Hispanic Bar Association, Disability Bar, Women's Bar, National Association of Black Women Attorneys, South Asian Bar, and the Sam Carey Bar Association, which I believe is the
Colorado Black Bar Association.
So we're trying to be more proactive in that. Also, Gordon and a couple other attorneys went to a DC recruitment event. Again, if you're going to a more diverse pool, you're gonna get more diverse applicants. We've also started a process where when we get attorney applicants, I remove all identifying information. So anything that would indicate ethnicity, race, gender, age is removed. So when administrative folks look at it, they don't know who they're looking at. So those are just some steps we're trying to take. In addition to that, we're doing some equity salary checks for positions. So we just did a salary study for our attorneys last August, but with that, we also looked at age and gender to make sure it made sense where people were falling. And recently we just submitted or are working with HR. There are some positions in our office, you'll notice we are significantly female in our office, and that's because we have a lot of clerical and social work heavy positions. So our victim advocates and our diversion folks are majority female. Their requirements are to have a college degree. A lot of them have their masters. They are paid lower than some positions that do not require those and are more traditionally filed or filled by males. So we are adjusting their salaries to balance those things out. So it takes time, but you have to have a critical analysis and look at, does this make sense and who are filling these jobs? So those are things we continue to work on.
Do you use the term social work? Do you require a BSW or MSW?
BSW, but many of them get their masters. In part, that's just something that they're passionate about. But I don't, the masters is only required for supervisory position.
Mm-hmm.
Some other things that we are working on. Last year, we worked with the Black Student Union at CSU for an internship project. Unfortunately, it was delayed in part because CSU wasn't approving a credit on their side. But the goal was to have some students come in and help us do some analysis, help with the PPI dashboard, help and sit in on meetings, go to court, and let us know things that we might not see. It's kind of that accountability check, things that, because we don't see it as your unconscious bias, we wanted someone to come in and help us with that. That's still something we're working on. We talked about the DEI training, talked about our postings now have the bilingual language. And also when we get folks who are bilingual, we do pay them more, in part because there's a higher expectation they're having to do work other folks aren't doing. That's kind of my quick. Oh, another part that I just think is really important as we're talking about this, some of our diversion programs, which is an area we're really growing in. Things that we didn't think about until we either it was brought to our attention or we saw it. We now have a live real-time interpreter available at all of our programs. A lot of the parents, especially juveniles, are not necessarily fluent in English. So having that so they understand what's being explained to their child during those programs. And then we're also looking at whether we can provide childcare or just eliminate those other barriers for folks. So it's something we continue to look at. Any questions?
I need to ask the two people on the Zoom if they have any questions. For Mary or Gordon.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Same
Thank you.
here.
Do we need to email?
Okay. Any questions?
Sorry. For the information, thank you very much.
Excellent.
Very good if you send it to Teresa, she.
I've got a question, maybe it's a little obscure, I don't know. But is there any way,
I love the obscure ones.
not you will. Mary talked about when you're evaluating applicants for jobs, you take out any reference to ethnicity, gender, whatever. Is there any way of doing that with filing decisions? So that you're just looking at the crime?
Yeah, that's a conversation we've had too. It's sort of technically difficult to get that over. One of the barriers, this is a good or a bad thing, is 5 years ago that actually probably would have been a lot easier because we're just getting reports and you can do essentially what Mary does in her applications, which is, you know, redact the names, redact the race, whatever. I mean, not the rate of race in applications, but in police reports you do. And that might be simple. Now we get, and what, again, one of those things that I think is really important to get at that filing decision is the body-worn cameras. And without seeing the body-worn cameras, especially on a more complicated case, it's hard to make a good filing decision. And so sometimes certainly we're able to do it without the body-worn cameras. But if you're talking about, well, there was an assault, there might be a self-defense claim and it's on a body-worn camera, and you'd be a fool to not watch that body on camera. And so then you've watched it, and obviously race is there, right? You can't take it away. So that's sort of where the rubber's met the road and making that really difficult for us to do in this age of body-worn cameras. Starting actually just in a couple weeks, body-worn cameras will be mandatory across all law enforcement agencies in Colorado. I think everyone in Larimer County has one now. The Jackson County sheriffs, because I'm also in Jackson County, they are getting theirs in a couple weeks. They're the last one to come on. But so body-worn cameras everywhere now, and that's such important evidence. And even sometimes if, body-worn camera didn't capture it, well, we're looking at surveillance video, and we're looking at people's cell phone videos, and we're looking at photographs of injuries to figure out, well, how serious is this injury? Should we file this as a misdemeanor or a felony? So those visual elements are so crucial to smart filing decisions now. And again, going back to what we can prove, juries expect visual evidence. So if I say, well, this is a well-written police report, really describes this well, and I think this is a great case, well, if the video is not great too, then it still might mean I can't prove it. Because of jury expectations in 2023. So we have not figured out a great way to do that. I know that there's DA's offices in the country that do redact reports, but I think that's because they're not getting the same amount of body camera that we do in Colorado now.
Are we ready to move on? Mary? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's right. I think I've heard your news what happened.
We're kind of good there.
I hope so. I need to help. I recognize my husband.
Yeah.
Let's go to my house and talk to you.
Yes, I know. Go by your house. I'll make our so everybody have a good weekend. Thank you.
Jill,
Yes, sir.
are you presenting?
I am not, Stacy is. You left out today.
All right. Jill, am I going to like them? Yes, you are.
All right, so Stacy Schaefer from the jail. I don't have a commission study, you're looking at it. So this will be 3 lovely slides about what's going on at the sheriff's office. So all right, my little charts. I don't know if you can move that.
I can't, I don't think I can.
I'm sorry. I can't move it either. So I've got the raw numbers up here in the corner. This is representing the carceral population, so anyone in the jail. And this is a snapshot from yesterday. But let me read the numbers that are blocked by the little powder horn room. So white, we had 298 inmates. Black, 31. Asian American and Pacific Islander, we had 1. We had someone who didn't identify or didn't claim a race or ethnicity, and 102 Latinx. So I'm using that term as a modern term and saying Hispanic. Okay. So that's the carceral population. And then this is the employees at the sheriff's office. So this includes all of the sheriff's office, including patrol and the jail, just because the data wasn't necessarily there for just identifying who works in the jail. But we have 381 white employees, 10 Black employees, and that's the number 12 for Asian American Pacific Islander, 21 who didn't offer race, and then 48 from Latinx.
Do you have the levels of those employees?
I don't have for the purposes of today, but I can tell you everybody that works at the jail at my rank or above is white. So everybody on command staff, the sheriff, and the commanders are all identified as white.
I hate to ask this, but is that by design?
I don't know what sort of design. would design it that way, but it is what it is.
Okay, thanks.
I can't speak about design or what have you, it just is. And if you consider who joins a law enforcement organization, most of the folks in command have many years of experience. It hasn't been necessarily a modern approach to encourage DEI issues. You've only been on the committee a year, we're getting there. I'm pushing, wherever we can, but there's no females at the command level above lieutenant. Right now we have 3, just for the jail side, 3 female lieutenants as of 2 weeks ago.
I don't know who they are.
Hinton, Tatunzik, and me.
Oh, nice.
And then we have 3 males, Bellender, Berglund, and Johnson. Fast went to patrol. Okay, there we go.
I
Sorry.
see we all have those names.
Yeah.
Would a biracial person show up in the unknown category? Be represented somewhere else?
I only had like 1, and I believe I put them in the unknown because they just felt lonely by themselves. So I did. I had 1 person who identified that way. And again, this study is commissioned by me. So it's not terribly racy. But here we go. All right, so here's what I did. I took the percentages of the whole of the race because obviously the numbers would be slightly off. So I did the comparison of percentages of employees versus the carceral population. So it probably comes to no surprise, but there are more white employees than there are white inmates, and fewer Black or African American employees than there are Black inmates. And yet we have more Asian American Pacific Islander employees than we do inmates. There was 1 in that category, 1 inmate, and then unknown also had 1 inmate or staff or in the unknown category. And then for Latinx, we have fewer employees than we do inmates in our custody.
It would be interesting to compare this to the general population.
Yeah, I had that number as well. And I think I didn't like it. It was too clunky, and I wasn't sure if I had accurate records. But I did make that attempt. I do know that we have more, for example, more African American criminal justice involved individuals than we would have. Like it's a 0.3% African American here, and this is representing my carceral employee of 7.2. So it's more.
And I just, to maybe try to help, on our page, defendant characteristics page, we have the county population based on the 2020 census. So it says Black is 1%, white is 79%, Hispanic is 7%, multiracial is 10%. If that's helpful to folks.
I always thought that the Latin population was closer to 16% within the county.
I know part of that because we struggled with how to present this data a lot, talking about what categories to put people in. It's impossible to sort of get it right. And I know one of the things we struggled with was exactly some of the conversation we had is, do people identify as Hispanic? Do they identify as multiracial? Some Hispanic people might identify as Caucasian because of whatever their ethnicity is. And so that was difficult, and our proportionality analysis goes into that a little bit. So I'd assume it sort of depends how you count, which is not a very satisfying answer, but.
I totally understand.
The sheriff's office also, I had to mine the data. So we have white, Hispanic, and white non-Hispanic. So it doesn't even necessarily break, it's a portion of the whole. So it had to be gleaned separately. There you have it, that's the conclusion. It won't even let me conclude with a black screen.
Do these percentages reflect the alternative sentencing programs, or
No,
this is just the jail?
just the jail. And so the alternative sentencing, we're cousins. So we have a sheriff and then Emily that both report essentially to the commissioners, or as such. You might describe it differently, but if I'm trying to.
I know the sheriff would not describe him reporting to the commissioners.
Yeah, I know.
I know Emily
So I'm gonna have to back him
describe
up.
herself as reporting to the commissioners.
I know, but when I'm trying to get there, right? I always say Emily's the sheriff of alternative programs, and I know that's not the title that she would probably endear herself to either. But then the sheriff's office has just the jail. But if we don't, we recognize the symbiotic relationship that we have, because essentially alternative sentencing rents our inmates to put in their program. I say that too, because if we didn't have this program, we'd end up with, we'd be at, I don't know, 1,000. Yeah, we'd be at 1,000 inmates regularly, and to have the programs really work. But then I feel like the jail offers this opportunity for those that aren't ready to work through a program, aren't ready to follow the rules. They have to have something to go to say, okay, I get it now. The sort of rock bottom, if you will, over at the jail, or some way to filter out people that aren't going to be ready, that aren't quite ready to do the work. They need to go to jail, find their opportunity another day. I still say that word, Mary. Mary is my intern as well. So I would call it, I call jail, it's a opportunity. You didn't plan it, you didn't arrange for it, you didn't schedule it, but today is your opportunity, if you want, to change your life, to stop what you were doing that got you to jail, and we'll give you that opportunity to get you out in the right way.
I love that phrase, it's opportunity.
I know. I thought it was really clever. I copyrighted. I didn't, but I say it all the time, and I really believe in that. It's just opportunity.
Do any of the statistics look at the home housing status?
Yes. Not presently, but we have this dashboard. So if you look up Larimer County Jail dashboard, it will say who's homeless, who is sheltered, and transient. Homeless, transient, and there's one more, I think.
Sheltered, homeless, transient.
Yeah, homeless, I got it now. And it's about a third of our population, a full third. So homeless is like you live here in Larimer County. Transient is you came from another location, passing through, and you wouldn't necessarily stay here. And then sheltered means you don't have your own space, but you might be couch surfing. You could be at the Murphy Center or Catholic Charities. You're in a shelter situation, but you don't have a apartment or home or a permanent place to be.
And people in supportive housing, are they considered housed?
Yes.
You mentioned that if you didn't have the alternatives, you'd have 1,000. What do you normally have? What's your usual size?
Right now we're at 400. Today was like 432 inmates, and it changes by. It could change by about 30 per day, depending. And we're in a real lull, quite frankly. I think some of our pre-COVID numbers hit up to 650, and but right now after COVID, we've never reached back up to those numbers. I think perhaps when we were at our fullest in the past 12 months, we might have hit 530 inmates.
Is that a reflection of changes in the DA's office and alternative programming?
Yeah, and I think right after COVID, like when COVID occurred, there were a lot of courts were not seeing cases, and justice just really slowed. And so there was a series of catch-up months where trying to get people in, or people that would have otherwise served a sentence. Now the judge is saying, okay, COVID is resolving itself, we all have vaccinations, you can go to jail now because you've been, particularly, if you deserved jail 2 years ago, now you're really gonna get it because now we feel good about it. Sitting you guys, I know they don't talk like this. This is the end of a 14-hour day.
That's more insulting than what after most judges say.
You're gonna get it now, mister. I'm sure they don't say that, but I literally just please forgive my candor, my vernacular. But they're getting caught up. But then, they did get kind of caught up, sort of. We're kind of back to normal, but I think everybody said, why? Why do we need to use jail in the same way? We were trying to reduce numbers anyway. Let's be more creative. There's a full trend on getting people out of incarceral settings. We realize, I think the whole justice system has a level of awareness that it doesn't do any good. I try to make it do a lot of good. I'm working the best I can in there, but it doesn't do a lot of good. It interrupts people's lives, it interrupts their job employment, their housing, their relationships, all of the things. But some people need that. Some people need to say, hey, here's your moment. But I think in general, we're looking at so many alternatives.
It just seems to me that a 30% drop in incarceration rates reflects more changes than just the pandemic, which
Alternative
is.
sentencing is experiencing the same number of crowds.
Part of it is the philosophy in our office is, really trying to think very consciously about what is this jail sentence serving.
Because that's like the same 2-year period, right?
Yeah, similar. I'm on the jail population site that Stacy mentioned right now, and you can see those numbers. And I think there's sort of another split within there is some of that jail population is what we call the pretrial population. So those that have yet to be sentenced and are being held on a bond. Some of that population is a sentenced population, those serving a jail sentence from a judge. And I think what we've seen is that the pretrial population has stayed sort of relatively similar. But the sentenced population has gone down even more significantly than sort of those top line numbers would show. Because we created an adult diversion program a year and a half ago. And we're still getting people in that deferred programs at the same rates as we've expanded that diversion, and as case numbers have gone down a little bit too. We've kept all those up because again, we're trying to think what is going to get this person to not return to the criminal justice system, right? Because we are keeping the community safe and we're preventing new crime, and if we're getting folks not to return, we're preventing new crime because recidivism is, of course, one of the big drivers of crime. And so a lot of that is going to be non-incarceration alternatives. One of the things that we're looking at is, for instance, drug use. And so very, very rarely where are we ever requiring jail as part of a sentence on a drug use or drug possession case, separate from drug distribution, for instance. But drug use cases, drug possession cases are a pretty big chunk of cases. Drugs, narcotics are everywhere, fentanyl's everywhere. But those folks, rarely are they going to benefit from jail. They're going to benefit from drug treatment. And so we're trying to incentivize that in every extent possible, for instance, in that type of case.
So I'm just scrolling through the website. So here's our transient population. This monthly jail population, so it had it at 623. I know we've been higher than that, but it was probably before we had the dashboard. It was a hot July. Oh, wow. I remember it well. Email. 3 cents total bookings for the year. So this is year to date. And then our average length of stay is 19 days. For those that stay longer than a week, because they can't bond out, the average length of stay is about 40 days, those that end up getting sentenced. So, but yet, when you think of the average, some people will stay longer, but then you might have a bunch of DUIs that stay less than 24 hours. So that's how lots of this number ends up averaging out to 19 days. List of money spent on the inmate services. We have medically assisted treatment at the jail. We're one of the top programs in the country for having all FDA approved medication assisted treatment, although in July it becomes a law that you gotta do it. We've been doing it for 4 years, so keeping that going.
Are the non-participants, is anybody in that group eligible for MAP? Okay, so that's people who aren't in for.
That's just a really basic, like who's in, who's out, but it has nothing to do with eligibility. That would include somebody who's not on opiates.
Right, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's
So
kind of
that's everybody else, that's
Yeah.
not people who refuse the program.
We have 100% screening, so everybody gets screened. And then those, it's about 100 inmates out of 450, so this might even be a little
Do you
bit.
have 100% participation of people who have drug issues? What's that actual number?
No, sometimes people will not be honest about whether they have a drug issue. So I don't have a good statistic on how many are probably need it and then refuse. A lot of
You
them
don't screen them when they come in their initial screening medically.
They do get screened, but they do not all get a tox screen. And then some of the medications are not like there isn't a good alternative MAT for certain, not medications, but street drugs, right? So everybody gets asked. Those that want to participate do, those that don't, detox. But we still offer case management, therapeutic interventions. If they change their mind, we get them set up.
This has been really helpful and lots of information. I need to draw it to a close and ask if we could follow up with email questions to you all.
Absolutely.
We have a little bit of a DEI board business to take care of. So we'll move on with the agenda if that's okay.
Alright. Would you like me to keep this going?
Yes, because we still have Karina is there and Samantha's welcome to stay if she wishes.
Are you guys, would you prefer if I step out?
No,
Nothing secret.
Okay, just making sure.
This is the official work.
Excellent.
this is.
What are we gonna do next month?
Thank you to all the presenters. Very helpful.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation, it was great.
Good to see you again. Yeah, this is my job. I get paid big bucks, $0 per month.
But what annually?
I'm looking for a 0% raise. Yeah, we have to talk about what we're going to do next month, and I also want to talk about we need to light a fire amongst the members who are not coming, and I'm not sure how to do that. So, Hillel, you had a suggestion about just calling people or sending a friendly email or something.
Yeah, I think leadership, which at the moment means you and me. I think we should be in touch with the other members by phone, by email, and not to talk business because that's, we can't do that, we're a public body, but to encourage them to come, to encourage them to come live, if they can possibly do that, and to participate. So that's the one idea I've had. I'm not sure what else we could try. We did have some discussion with Lori, with our staff person, about having a little social time for the members of the board to get to know each other a little bit better, and maybe that would encourage some people who haven't been coming to the meetings to maybe come a little more.
Laura, do you have phone numbers for the board members?
Yes,
Could you share that with Bill and me,
yes.
please? And then we can divide them up, decide who calls when. Karina, can we ask you to call somebody?
Of course, yeah.
Good. After I get those phone numbers, we'll make some assignments.
That sounds perfect.
Thank you.
Great.
So we will do that, and then we need to talk about what next month's program looks like. Or program. Meeting.
So
On
next,
Monday too.
next month's program is the agenda that was posted for tonight. So I'll get that fixed and ready to go, but it's that debrief discussion with Emily Humphrey and her team. And that's the follow-up the night that we had our meeting after you guys did the tour, and people provided a lot of feedback, and I wrote all those notes and questions down, and so then we want to get back with Emily and her team to review the input from the EDI board members themselves.
Did you send those notes and questions to Emily?
I met with her and her team and discussed them.
Okay.
And so what I'll do is I'll move, well, depending on what the leadership of the group wants to do, we were talking about, when should we have that social? Should the social be on a meeting date and time? Maybe that's something that you all could ask when you talk to people.
Yeah.
Or should it be at a regular meeting time or a separate time?
Well, I think it also should be after the new members
For sure.
board are appointed by the commissioners.
Yeah.
To include them.
That'll happen in July. The new members come on.
So, I don't like to take away from the business that we do to do one of our regular meetings for the social purposes. I think that I would like to see that as a separate time if people can make it.
So maybe we could ask people about the early in August, after the July meeting, to get together for a team building half day or whatever.
Sounds good. Karina, any thoughts?
Yeah, so August, which is completely fine, but I just won't be able to do that because I'm due August 11th.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. So I will be a little busy.
Yes, you will.
Well, we can schedule it for August 10th.
I mean, you guys can send me some food to the hospital.
I think your suggestion, Fred, of having the July meeting with the new people and doing something maybe in early to mid-August is a good idea. Sometime before our August business meeting.
And Lori, did I hear you say earlier today that the application time has been extended?
Yes.
So maybe when we talk to people, we should encourage them to help us recruit some new members.
That'd be a great idea. And then, Fred, is it okay if I take what we were going to do in June and then put that on the July agenda? So that would be the meeting with Human Services to learn more about their programs and their equity work, as well as the Community Health Improvement Plan.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. The one thing I would ask, whether it be Emily or Human Services, I think we need to structure these so that they're maybe only 70 or 80 minutes in length. Give the members time to debrief and talk about it and give feedback.
Okay.
Also, as we chatted earlier, do we need to do both of those in 1 month in one meeting, human services and the health improvement plan? Will that give us enough time to really learn about both of them?
I will check with Heather and see what she thinks on that.
Okay.
I think what she was concerned about doing is trying to explain the community health improvement plan without the board understanding health and human services work itself.
Okay.
But I'll double check though.
Okay, because I don't want to feel rushed.
Right.
Let me look at my notes to see what else. Oh, when we talk to people on the phone, let's really try to emphasize being here in person and making Zoom the exception to attendance.
Yes.
Karina,
So
any?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, with that of being in person, are we still alternating, into place as well?
It's kind of been interrupted because of the meetings we've been having here at the alternative justice programs.
Okay.
But we're gonna get back to that, yes.
Okay, yeah, I think when we can get back to that, I can for sure be in person here in Loveland. It gets a little bit trickier when I have to drive to Fort Collins.
Sure.
Maybe we can carpool once in a while, Karina.
Yeah,
I live in Loveland as well.
okay, perfect.
Anything else? Thanks for the great presentation.
Yeah, there's one other thing. I don't know if we can really do this with only 3 of us on the board present. But one of the things that I'd like to see us do is to make sure that Larimer County gets recognized as doing the work in DEI. We've discovered in our work with our commitment to self and society that there's a lot going on in DEI in Larimer County, in City of Fort Collins, perhaps in some of the other cities that I haven't heard about. But I would like to have the option of my notes of getting Larimer County's name as a sponsor of some of the things that are going on up there. For example, CSU has been doing an annual event. It started in 2001 as a one-day event. It's now up to a full week. It's called the Symposium for Inclusive Excellence. It takes place in October on campus. Some of us who are not university connected, but we're talking about similar types of projects, got in touch with the committee at CSU that runs that symposium and asked if we as community entities could join. And they seem to have approved. We were going to have a couple of our people go to their meetings. But from what I understand, the City of Fort Collins Human Relations Commission is going to be listed as one of the sponsors. Why not Larimer County? And so my question at this point for the 3 of us is this something that we as a board would like to do? The way it would work is that we would bring it up and decide if that's something, if there is a program that we want to be listed as a sponsor. And if we approve that, then Lori will take that to the county commissioners because they're the ones that have to approve the use of the name and the logo. Karina, what do you think?
I think that's an awesome idea.
Thank you.
And also, they extended the opportunity for presenters
Yes.
to put in a presentation. If there was a presentation from any part of the county, they would be welcoming of that as well.
Yeah, they put out a request for proposals.
extended it.
and extended it. So if anybody from the county would be interested in that, if they go to the CSU website and put in Symposium for Inclusive Excellence, they'll find the explanation of how to apply to make a presentation.
Excellent idea.
So having approved it in principle, is that something that we would like to get on
All in
board?
favor, say aye.
Aye,
Karina?
Aye.
unanimous, I love it. Thank you.
Anything else? We're supposed to end at 8 and it's 8:02. How about that?
Bingo.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all so much.